Jonathan here, and welcome to Learn to Playthrough, and welcome to my workstation. Today we're going to be finishing the painting process of the Gunslinger and the Saloon Girl, where I'll be giving them their first color, which is called a base coat. Then we'll be doing some detailing and highlighting if needed, a wash to add some depth and realism, a basing to give a feel for the surroundings, and then finishing off with a varnish to help protect. Now during this painting process, think of it more as painting tips and tricks than actual painting. For the painting, this is geared towards someone who has picked up a paintbrush at least once. So I'll be painting any miniatures off screen and then returning to discuss the step-by-step of the painting I just did. This way, you'll know what you're about to get into. But if you really need to see someone painting the Gunslinger, then you can head on over to the YouTube channel TabletopNoob to watch him paint this miniature, the Gunslinger, paint by paint. I'll go ahead and leave a link down in the show notes where you can find the video. As for the tips and tricks, these are geared towards all levels of painters, as you can never stop learning. So with that, just go ahead and sit back, relax, and enjoy. Now before we begin the painting process, there are a couple of tips to help you out with those stubborn paints and gaps in your miniatures that you had to assemble. For the first tip, as you can see, I'm ready to paint here. Now last time there was an issue with the Shadows of Brimstone Army painter paints I was going to use, and they were either runny or goopy. But now they've been revived a little bit better by using the following three methods. For the first method, I use these stainless steel shakers, and they are agitator balls. Now I've heard that you can use up to 3 of them would be good, and I went ahead and added 3 to each of the paint bottles to shake up the paint. Now make sure if these agitator balls are metal that they are truly stainless steel, as they may rust and damage the color and or application of your paint. As seen here from the YouTube channel Watch It Paint It, and I'll go ahead and leave a link down in the show notes where you can find this video, they went ahead and did a test with these agitator balls, and they went ahead and placed 3 agitator balls in some water for 48 hours, and as you can see on the left, the water is unaffected, but the water on the right turned an orange color, which depicts rust. And if you don't want to use or have stainless steel agitator balls, you can use other items like lava rocks, glass beads, or even a small piece of that sprue that your miniatures came on. Just make sure whatever you use is heavy enough, as some of the lighter stuff may not provide a proper mixing of your paints. For the second method, I shook them aggressively, but not by hand. As you can see in the video here, I went ahead and took a jigsaw, turned it upside down, and placed it in a vise. I then took a paint bottle and attached it to the saw blade with a rubber band, and I turned on the jigsaw. So as you can see, sometimes you don't need to buy specifically built items, just use things around the house. For the final third method, if the paint was still goopy or having trouble coming out, I added a few drops of water to the paint bottle. So I just have a little bit of water here. Now, not too much to make it runny or anything like that, but just enough for the paint to come out of the bottle a little bit easier. And as for the water, I used distilled water, just to be on the safe side, so you don't possibly have any impurities causing damage to the color and or application of your paint. For the second tip, I examined the Gunslinger and the Saloon Girl after priming, and I found several gaps on the Gunslinger's shoulders. I then went ahead and applied some filler into those gaps and primed again, and now the Gunslinger is good as new. The filler I use is called green stuff. Now you're probably saying, hey, I don't see any green, I just see blue and yellow. Well, if you remember back in your paint mixing days, if you took the primary colors of blue and yellow and mixed them together, you you got a secondary color called green, hence the name green stuff. Now green stuff is a two-part modeling clay for sculpting where you knead the blue and yellow together to produce green. It hardens fast, so you have about 30 minutes of molding time to produce the green stuff and apply it. Then it fully dries in about 8 hours. Now make sure you do your steps in order and don't go jumping around. This way you won't waste time having to fix your miniature over and over again. So remember, prep, prime, paint. Not prime, paint, prep, prime again, and then paint again, as I did in the case with the Gunslinger, as I found those gaps in the shoulders after I had primed the miniature. So in the end, take your time and be nice to your miniatures, and your miniatures will be nice to you. Well, that should do it for now. I got plenty more miniatures to paint, so plenty of tips coming your way. First up in the painting process is the Gunslinger. After analyzing the Gunslinger, it looks like I'll be painting the Gunslinger in 3 steps. Since there is no painting guide that I can use as a reference for what the Gunslinger looks like or what colors to use, I have found several pictures to use as reference, one of them being the hero character sheet. For the paints, I'm going to go ahead and use just the paints that came in the Shadows of Brimstone Heroes of the Old West paint set. So now that we're ready to go, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 1. For step 1, we're going to be applying what I said was the first color, also known as the base coat. And that will be all of the main colors that will be applied to the miniature. And there's about 13 different areas that we'll be applying to. We got the hat, the hair, and the flesh, the pistol, coat and tie, the shirt and the vest, belt, holsters, pants, boots, and then the base rim. For the hat, coat, tie, and pants, we're going to be using the Shadow Black. And then for his hair, we're going to be using this Desert Yellow, but then later on we're going to come back with some highlights by using the Dark Flesh, which is like a dark brown. For the flesh, we got light flesh, and then the pistol is a pistol metal. For the shirt, we're going to be using Spirit White. And now for the vest, I wanted to paint it a red, but this Saloon Red is a little bit too bright, so I'm going to go ahead and dull it down a little bit with some of this Shadow Black. Now, not too much because I'll be applying a wash to this area, and I don't want the wash to really darken it too much, so we'll just dull this just a little bit. And then for the belt, the holsters, boots, and the base rim, we're going to be applying this Dark Flesh, which is a dark brown. Okay, so with all that information and paints ready to go, let's go ahead and start painting our base coats with step 1. Hello there, and welcome back as we just finished up our step 1 of applying that first color, the base coat, to our Gunslinger. And as you can see, this workstation is a disaster. Paints are all over the place, here and there. We got paintbrushes. Oh my gosh, this this was a disaster, but I loved it. It took me about an hour to go ahead and paint up this miniature as far as we got, and I got some close-up pictures here for you. So the first picture here, we're zooming in right in at the front of him, and what is the weirdest thing is that when I applied the black, the white primer underneath was causing issues and bleeding through. So definitely, if you're going to prime to the colors that you're going to be using. So most likely I should have probably primed this miniature in 100% black, because as you can see, the coat, pants, and hat, they're all black, and so you want to go with the majority of the colors. So I was trying to add some water to the paints to thin them down so that they would go ahead and apply really nice, but it seemed that the paints were really becoming diluted from the water. I mean, I wasn't putting a lot of water in there, and I don't know what the deal was. So when I got to the fourth one, which was the pistol metal for the gun, I decided to just go straight out of the bottle, and you know what? It applied really nice. I thought that it was going to be kind of goopy and kind of messy, but you know, it applied really nice, and that's how I painted like 3 decades ago. Is I would just paint right out of the bottle. I didn't do any kind of diluting with water or anything like that, and it was nice. But what I see here is that applying the paint and then it's being diluted, so you see the undercolor, that you're going to have to come back and do a second coat, do a second base coat on here to actually get this to be a more solid color. So definitely now on the back, it's really not that bad looking at it as opposed to from the camera, because the camera produced a flash, and as you can see there's a lot of white spots on the back of his coat, and it's really not that bad. So that is very nice at the moment. Really, it's really looking good. Now I did an upper shot here, and as you can see, the white area, that is the white shirt that I used the Spirit White on, and I went ahead and used a really fine tip paintbrush here, a precise detail, a really small one, and I put that paint on there, the white paint, and I go to paint the shirt, and the first thing I said was, "Where is the shirt at?" I could not see where the shirt was. So I went ahead and just said, you know what, I think the shirt is right there. I took the paintbrush with the white paint and just started splotching it right on there. And actually with the paint on the miniature, you could actually see the area a little bit better. So don't just look at the miniatures and go, well, I can't really see anything. What's going on here? Start painting and it'll actually start bringing the details out so you're able to see it a little bit better. Now I did this shot coming down. I did the same thing with the flash. It kind of disrupted the black and you could see the primer underneath. So very interesting why it's doing that, because it's not looking that bad with just looking at it with my eyes. And then you could see on the base how the base is, I did brown. I went around the base line here to do brown, and I was just going to barely go up top, but I went a little bit farther. And the deal is that with the white primer underneath it, that when you go ahead and base your miniature and you glue down some rocks, there's the possibility that the rocks might be spread out and you'll see the white underneath. So that's why you should probably paint the base the color of what you want to do, whether it be rocks that are brown, paint it brown. If you got some kind of grass, then paint it a green. So whatever's underneath can come up through and it won't be seen as that much. So definitely looking at the miniature here from this side, the hair is a lot deeper and thicker yellow, kind of like a mustard yellow. Whereas on the picture there, you can see the flesh and then the yellow of the hair. The yellow is a little bit lighter. And like I said, we're going to come back with the dark flesh, which is the brown hair on the base. And we're going to go and do some highlights on the hair so it makes the Gunslinger have blonde with some dark in it. So it's going to look pretty nice that way. And now off on this side here, you can see that the flash really didn't do much to disrupt that black for some reason there. You can see on the right arm, it looks like I missed a spot there. You can see a big white space there. But looking at the gun, the gun over here is looking really nice, being just silver. The handle is probably brown. I could probably throw a little bit of brown on that because of the gun being a right-hander, and you can see the handle right here. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. Maybe I'll just throw a little dot of brown on there to see what I can do. And then on the vest, over here on the left side here, let's see, where's a good one here? Yeah, back to this one, that third one, you can see on this on the Gunslinger's right side. There's a big splotch of black there, and I was trying to paint the coat, and the brush slipped and just splatted right against the vest. So that's going to be during touch-up time, is getting that thing dealt with. But I tried to go with a deeper red, and actually looked like it turned into purple. So I took a couple drops of Saloon Red and went ahead and added some shadow black to it, and somehow I ended up getting like a purple. But it looks really nice because it's kind of a thick, deep, strong masculine color for him. And then I decided to say, you know what, hey, on the back, his coat's got a belt. So I'm going to go ahead and throw the same color from the vest on the back for the belt. So just go ahead and take a look at the back shot here. Where's that back shot at? There it is. See right there, you can see the belt looking pretty nice, a little predominant. But when we go back over it to do some touch-ups, we're going to add the color on top of the color, which is going to start thickening it up and making it look a stronger color there. Okay, well, now that the base coats are applied, and we're going to have to go back and thicken it up again, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing for step 2. So in step 2 here, we're going to be doing some touch-ups, some detailing, highlighting, and some wash. Now we're going to go ahead and do the whole entire model here with touch-ups. So any paints that kind of bled over into another area, like the coat onto the vest, okay, we're going to have to go ahead and get that fixed up. And then anything else, which there's probably a lot of areas here. Mostly with the touch-up, it's going to be like with the black, how it's bleeding the white through. So we have to just go ahead and probably run over the whole entire model with the second coat to get them to look a lot better with the colors, until I can actually figure out the paint system here of actually, do I put water in there or not, and stuff like that. For the detailing, probably if I can see some buttons on that vest, maybe I'll give it a little splash of a white or maybe a silver, some of that pistol metal. So he's got like some silver buttons, and then maybe a belt buckle. We'll throw some silver on there also. And then details also. Oh, hey, his eyes, gotta have some eyes. So that's like one of the worst ones to do is the eyes. So we'll try and figure that one out, what we're going to do with that one. For the highlights, we're going to go ahead and most likely on the front of the pants here, we'll splash up some white. And then on the arms, we'll splash some white on there to show the highlights of the sun glistening off that. And then maybe on the gun barrel, we'll go and do that. And then also I said with the highlights, we're going to go ahead and take some of that dark flesh and give the hair a little bit of darkening so he doesn't have such light hair and stuff like that. So the final thing we're going to do is a wash on him. So after you're completely done with the model and you are totally satisfied with it, now it doesn't mean you can't go back to it, because you can go, it doesn't matter what you do, you can always go back and do other things. We're going to go ahead and give it a wash with this soft tone ink. So it's a softer wash that we're going to apply. Now don't just go ahead and get yourself a really big brush here and just scoop it out and put it all over there. Get yourself a nice small to medium brush and direct the inks to certain areas that you think would be more highlighted of a dark shadow and such like that. And so go with that instead of just slopping it all on there, because with that there's going to be a lot of extra of soft tone ink wash pooling in the crevices for the shadows, and it's more going to look like glop than it is going to look like a shadow. So you got to watch that. So that should probably do it that. So with all that information and paints ready to go, let's go ahead and continue on with step 2. Hello there, welcome back as we just finished up step 2 with our touch-ups, detailing, highlighting, and finally finishing off a wash with this Gunslinger. Step 2 took me about an hour and a half to complete. And you might be thinking to yourself, why did it take him so long? Well, we had several areas here to deal with. First of all, go ahead and doing the touch-ups, you'd go ahead and do one area and actually touch another area, and then do another area and touch another area, and then back and forth, And eventually I got all the areas painted. Another issue we had was the white primer underneath was still bleeding through the black paint. So definitely going to have to do something with the paints here where maybe I'm going to have to reduce the amount of water placed in them or actually just paint straight from the bottle. So our touch-ups got completed there. And then the primer, definitely think about the main color that you're going to be using with your base coat and use the appropriate primer. So definitely I should have used a black primer with our Gunslinger. Another issue we had here was I went ahead and looked around at the different areas to find that I think that this area should have been this color and that area should have been that color. So you can see here in this picture where underneath the vest and just above the belt buckle there's that triangle, and it's that dark color of the vest. And I figured, you know what, that triangle area is actually his white shirt. So as you can see here, I went ahead and just changed that color to a white. So now that he's got a white shirt in that area. Then over here on the left side for the hand holding the gun, you can see here that it was actually a dark color that I used there instead, and I figured, well, you know what, he's probably holding the gun and his fingers are wrapped around. So with that, I went ahead and just changed out that color and added some more flesh so that now it looks like his hand is wrapping around the gun. Next, we went ahead and continued on with our details, and there really wasn't a lot of more details to do with our miniature here. So on the front here, I went ahead and added some silver buttons to his vest, and then his belt buckle, I went ahead and changed that to a silver. So that's really it for the details. For our highlighting, went ahead and we used a highlighting brush. So it's kind of a stubby, thick brush bristles at the end here. You'll go ahead and you'll just dab it in whatever color you're going to be highlighting with. Go ahead and get yourself a paper towel and then just start brushing the brush onto the paper towel to get rid of most of the paint till you hardly have anything left. Another thing you can probably do is use it against your hand so that you can actually see the color a little bit. And then go ahead and just do some quick wisps across certain areas that you want to represent as highlighted. So here I went ahead and did some white highlighting on the pants and then on his coat sleeve and his hat. And then I also went ahead and got the dark flesh and applied it to his hair. So instead of having some bright yellow hair, it's a little bit darker there. And then on the back I went ahead and did the same thing with the white across the coat there, and then added some more of that dark flesh to the hair. So the highlightings came out pretty good there. Off on the left hand side here, did some highlighting on the pants there. And then I ended up finishing it off with a wash. So with the wash, it didn't really work too good on the dark areas, so the pants and the boots, you can't really see it that good. On the vest, it was a little bit okay, but the best was like the triangle area underneath the vest there. You can see that the wash started pooling to show some shadows on the white shirt. And then on the hands, definitely you can see where the wash pooled between the fingers, so that now you can see that there's some good fingers there. Then I tried to do the old paint a single dot for the pupils, and it was a disaster. But then I thought, you know what, if I'm going to add a wash, that's going to add a dark color, so why don't we go ahead and use a wash instead? So I applied the wash onto the face, where underneath the eyebrows it adds a little bit of depth there, and then underneath the cheekbones you can see that it's adding some there. And I think it turned out pretty good. Instead of trying to get a couple black dots in there, just adding some wash to represent the facial structures and the eyes. Well, that's going to do it for that. But, oh, actually here's a safety tip. on this picture here, on the side view here, you're looking at the base, and you can see how I painted it brown. Well, you also can see the poster tack that's coming out underneath the base that's helping it hold on to the dowel that I'm using here. Well, sometimes it's coming loose, and I'd go ahead and grab it with my hand, and my fingers would press against the base and actually would start removing some of the paint, or actually putting my fingerprint onto the base rim. So definitely think about investing in some kind of a good system that can hold your miniature onto the place that you're wanting to hold on to. If you're wanting to use your hand to hold onto the base, then think about maybe painting the base later on, or maybe use some kind of protective glove on your hands so that you don't get your fingerprints and any oils damaging the base rim. Okay, well that's going to do it for step 2. And with our final step remaining, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 3. Okay, for step 3, we're going to be doing our basing and protecting of our miniature. For the basing, remember it's going to be depicting where our miniature is located at. In our case, we're going to be using the basing material to say that, hey, this is a Western gunslinger. He needs to be in a Western area. So we're going to be applying some fine gravel, maybe some dead bushes, a stick to represent like a log, or maybe some boulders or anything like that. So we'll see what we have to do our basing with. And over here is what we got for my basing materials from Scene-A-Rama at Hobby Lobby. I picked up some wild grass, and you can see it's like 2 to 3 inches long. Well, I think that's going to look kind of bad on this base here. So we'll have to take some out, give it a little bit of a cut, and then apply that onto the base. And then also we'll be using maybe some fine gravel, because the Western's got dirt and gravel. So we'll go ahead and apply those two in the area. And then if there's anything else around here that I can find, maybe we'll add that in. Then for our protecting of our miniature, we'll be using this spray lacquer from Testors. And so once everything is complete and you're happy with this, we'll go ahead and go outside and give it a spray down. And the spray lacquer here is actually a matte varnish. So it's going to dull down your miniature. And actually the black right now is looking kind of dull, but if you're using like a gloss paint, and depending on where the miniature is located at, in this case it's in the Wild Wild West with outside and dirt, and so you don't really see a lot of glossiness out there. So we use that spray-on varnish from Testors, and it's going to be a matte varnish, so it's going to dull down the colors a little bit. Well, so with all that information, spray and other items ready to go, let's go ahead and finish our miniature with step 3. Hello there, welcome back, and we just finished up step 3 with our basing and protecting of our gunslinger. Step 3 took me about an hour to complete, and I'd just like to say that I'm very happy with the results. For the basing, I used those items from Scene-A-Rama. I used the yellow looking grass, and I took a chunk of it and cut about a ½ inch off, and I made a dead looking bush out of it. I then used the sand and those rocks. I used 3 medium-sized rocks, as I figured those large looking rocks would have been a little bit too big for the size of the base. I then used this super glue gel from Gorilla to adhere those items to the base. On the base in the front left, I figured that'd be a nice area to place the dead looking bush. And then I took the 3 medium-sized rocks and placed them around the gunslinger, and I tried to keep them away from the edge of the base so that I could have the sand go around those rocks, because I didn't think the rocks next to the side of the base would look that good. So here's the placement of the dead bush and the 3 medium-sized rocks. Most of the time was because of that dead bush. It took about 15 to 30 minutes to get that thing hooked up, glued up, and to stay in place. That was pretty much the most problemsome of it. Those 3 medium-sized rocks were pretty easy. Just put super glue on the base and put the rocks on the glue. So that was pretty easy for that. I then took super glue and placed it all over the other areas of the opened base, and then I put the base underneath the sand, and then pushed the sand onto the super glue so the sand would go into the super glue a little bit better. Went ahead and pulled it off and tapped off some of the excess. As you can see it here, it's very much a mess. Then took my finger and just ran it around the edge of the base to go ahead and brush off any extra sand that was sticking out. For the sand that was on the medium-sized rocks and the gunslinger's boots and in the bush, I went in and just took an X-Acto knife and took the point of it and just started flicking off little pieces of sand. And then after that I started cleaning it up a little bit better. That 5-foot bush is now dropped down to a couple feet. Went ahead and just took some scissors, and instead of just snipping it straight across, go at it at different angles, heights, so that it looks like it's not a unnatural looking cutting. So it looks like it's actually a natural looking growing, well, it's a dead bush now, but when it was growing, it looks kind of natural looking. And then also, it's going to be clumped together like this. So I took the X-Acto knife and put it just directly into the bush, and then just started turning the blade so that it kind of opened up the bush a little bit, adding some volume to it. So there we got the different angles of it as it's looking a little bit better here. And that's the end result of the basing. So that looks very nice. Now that you're all done with the miniature, painting it up, and the basing, and making sure that you think that everything looks all nice and good, I went ahead and applied the matte varnish to it so that it had a protective coating. But after I sprayed it on, you know what? It looked a little bit different from the results I thought it was, because from what I was told that the matte varnish should actually dull down the color. So here's now the picture of the matte varnish, and it actually looks a little bit glossier. But it actually died down a little bit more, so you know, maybe about an hour afterwards, it's going to die down to its fullest extent of its less glossiness, and it actually does not look that bad. So the different angles here, you're going to see how glossy it looks. But like I said, overall, it looks very good, very good. Well, there you have it, our Gunslinger. All the way from assembly to primed, step 1, step 2, and finally step 3. The overall time for the Gunslinger, including painting, changing of paints, drying, gluing, and etc., was around 3.5 hours. Now with the Gunslinger complete, let's go ahead and continue on with the Saloon Girl. After analyzing the Saloon Girl, it looks like I'll also be painting the Saloon Girl in 3 steps. This time there is a painting guide that comes with the Heroes of the Old West paint set for the Saloon Girl, and this way it'll show you what colors to use and where they're located at. Now here we got the Saloon Girl with the gaming standard, where you view the miniature about 6 feet away when it's on the gaming board, and then the master class when you get up close and personal. Now there might be several other color variations that I'm going to be changing, so to help me out, I found several other pictures to use as reference, including the hero character sheet. For the paints, I'm going to only be using the paints that came with the Shadows of Brimstone Heroes of the Old West paint set. And remember, just like the Gunslinger, I'll be painting off screen and then returning to discuss the step-by-step of the painting I just did. But if you still would like to see someone paint the Saloon Girl, you can head on over to the YouTube channel TabletopNoob to watch him paint this miniature paint by paint. And as you know, I left a link down in the show notes where you can find the video. So now that we're ready to go, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 1. In step 1, we'll be applying that first color, which is called the base coat. And there's about 14 different areas on the Saloon Girl that we're going to be dealing with. We got the hat, hair, flesh, collar piece, the pistol, gloves, arm sleeves, and the dress, feather boa, skirt, leggings, boots, clothing trim, and then finishing off with the base rim. For the hat, it is multiple colored with green, white, and red. For the green, we're going to be using the portal blue along with the desert yellow. And those are the primary colors of blue and yellow. When you mix them together, you get that secondary color green. And then for the white, we'll be using spirit white. And then for the red, we'll be using that bright red, which is the Saloon red. For the hair, we're going to be using desert yellow. And then we're going to go ahead and do not a highlight to the hair, but we're actually going to do a wash by using the dark flesh. So we'll go ahead and use the dark flesh and add some extra water to it to turn it into a wash so that when we apply it to the desert yellow hair, it won't be a highlight that sits on top of the colors and the curves. It'll actually be a wash that runs off the highlights and goes down into the crevices so that it'll show off the yellow of the hair, but then it'll then give darkness down into the crevices. For the flesh, we'll be using light flesh, and the pistol, we have pistol metal. For the gloves and the arm sleeves, we'll be doing green again with the portal blue and the desert yellow. And then we're going to be adding some shadow black and spirit white to it so that we are able to get it more of a darker green and a lighter green. Now when we do that process, especially with the darker part that we did with the Gunslinger and his vest, going from that red, trying to get a little deeper red, but now it looks purple, we're going to just go ahead and add just little bits of black to it just to change the color of the green to a little bit more darker. Then for the collar piece, the dress, and the boots, we'll be going using the bright red of Saloon red. And then our feather boa, we got the spirit white. For the sleeve trim, the dress trim, and the boot laces, and also the skirt and the leggings, we'll be using shadow black. And finally, with the base rim, we'll go ahead and use that brown, which is the dark flesh. So with all that information and paints ready to go, let's go ahead and start painting our base coats with step 1. Hello there, and welcome back as we just finished up our step 1 of applying that first color, the base coat, to our Saloon Girl. Step 1 took me about 1 hour and 35 minutes. Can you believe that? For the Gunslinger, it only took me an hour, but the Saloon Girl, it took me an hour and 35 minutes. And I couldn't figure out why until I examined her afterwards to find out that there's actually a lot of these 3-point contacts on her that's probably why it took so long. And there's a lot more of those 3-point contacts on her than there was on the Gunslinger. So as you can see here, her left glove, her left arm sleeve trim, and her red dress, that's a 3-point contact. And her face, hair, and her hat, that's another 3-point contact area. And there's a lot more of them on her that's having you slow down so that you don't go ahead and just splotch the paint over onto different areas. You got to be a little bit careful. Now definitely use yourself a precise detailed paintbrush, which is a small short paintbrush with a very fine point, to go ahead and paint those areas and go nice and slow. One thing you can do is, instead of getting all the way to that area, maybe hold back just a little bit, and then you can get yourself a toothpick and then go ahead and just whittle it down to a really fine point, and then you can go ahead and just dip it into some paint and dip onto the area that you want the paint to go, and maybe slide it around a little bit more dipping, a little bit more dipping replacement, and back and forth, and before you know it, you'll have your miniature all painted up with the base coats. Now also you can see here that the black primer underneath is bleeding through the red on her dress, and then for the green, it doesn't really look that noticeable of difference there, but I went ahead and used the Portal Blue and Desert Yellow to make one part of each to make the green, and then I used that to paint the arm sleeves and the hat. And then I went and added some Shadow Black by placing that off to the side and then grabbing a little bit of it, mixing in with the green, getting a little bit more, mixing in with green, and oh, that looks good. Now you can't really tell the difference between the greens here that good, except for the hat, but that hat, it's because there's probably just a light above it that's making it look light. I got another picture that shows it a little bit better, and I'll go ahead and point that out when we get to it. So it's looking pretty good here, the Saloon Girl. On her right side, the black is bleeding through the red, and as you can see, the green hat, it's looking very light, just because the light above is making it look very light. On the back, we got a lot of issues here. The large red area here, you can see that the black is bleeding through. Now, just above the white Feather Boa, you got that little area of red, and you can see how bright that red is compared to the red down below. And I think what happened was that, actually, when I was doing the priming from the top with the white, the hair is in the way, so I don't think the priming of the white got into that area. I think that the Feather Boa, when I was painting the white there, I put some of the white in that area, so when I put the red on that, there's a white underlay that made the red look a little bit brighter than it did down here because it's got a black primer underneath it. So definitely that's something to keep in mind, that when you use primer, think about the colors you want your miniature to be, or maybe the surroundings. Maybe this miniature is going to be in a dark cave or something, or maybe it's going to be in a snowy area, so maybe use white primer or black primer. Now you can definitely see the green is showing some difference there. The right glove is very dark in color as opposed to the right arm sleeve. You can see how the difference of colors are. And then for her hair, it's looking very yellow, but here it's more of a mustard to a very, very light brown color. So, and then, like I said, we're not going to do a highlight, which is on the top part. We're actually going to do a wash that gets down into the recesses here. And so she's going to have blonde hair with some of wash with the dark flesh here. And then we'll go ahead and make a wash out of that to apply on her hair. And on her left side here, as you see, the black's bleeding through the red. And then also on her right boot there, you can see there's some brown that I got on there. Now, for the base, we're going to be doing some basing on there. So definitely we don't need to get too close to her boot with that brown. We should have stayed back maybe about 1 millimeter or 2, because now what's going to happen is when we come back with our touch-ups, we're going to have to go ahead and paint some red to cover that brown, but most likely I'm going to end up touching the base with the red, and you're going to end up going back and forth, back and forth. Now, it might take you a couple seconds just to do that, but if you have multiple areas at a couple seconds, it adds up, and next thing you know, you're taking minutes and hours extra to paint up a miniature. And if you got a couple of them, not big of a deal, but if you got a couple hundred of them, that's when it's going to, you start needing to do some good time management with your painting. upward shot here, a nice worms view. So got the black coming through the red, and that's, you know, we'll go ahead and during touch up we'll add another coat or two, and it'll strengthen it up. So it's looking pretty nice there. And then we got a bird's eye view here coming down. You can see that the Saloon Girl is set back a little bit on the base there, and her feet are parallel as opposed to like the Gunslingers, the feet were going forward. So she's got more area here that I can deal with when I want to go ahead and see what I want to place there for the basing, and we'll figure that out in step 3 when we get to it. So we've got a close-up on her right hand there holding the pistol. As you can see where the handle is at, I'm going to need to go ahead and put some white in there from the hero character sheet. She's holding a pistol that's got a white handle, so we'll do that. And then also, sometime these miniatures, they're not going to come out really good because it looks like she's only got 3 fingers. So the mold isn't that good there. So definitely use your paints to help the bad mold look pretty good. And as you can see on the back here, it looks like now she has a stub for a hand. So you'll definitely have to use your colors to move around to maybe make it look like that's going to be a finger, or that's going to be part of the gun, you know, stuff like that. So definitely use your paints wisely and manipulate them around that you can go ahead and do some good with your miniature. Well, now with the base coats applied, let's go ahead and see what we'll be doing in step 2. For step 2, we're going to be doing some touch-ups, detailing, highlighting, and then when we're all happy with that, we're going to apply a wash. So we're going to be doing the entire model, and we'll go ahead and do our touch-ups. So there's a lot of areas that paint kind of bumped into other areas, so we'll have to go back and you know, touch them up a little bit with the paintbrush, or, you know, even use the toothpick trick there. For the detailing, we got some buttons on her dress to go at, and then also on her boots we got some black shoelaces that we're going to go ahead and apply there. So we'll do some detailing on her boots also. And then for the highlighting, her arms are covered up with that Feather Boa, so not like the Gunslinger where his arm is out and we could do some highlights on his arms to make it look like some kind of a shine, but we'll go ahead and do some highlighting on her her legs, and then definitely back here because they got a lot of wavy areas that we can do some highlighting back there, so that'll look really nice. And then you know, we're definitely not going to do highlighting on her hair, but instead we'll go ahead and do a wash on her, and we're going to be using the soft tone ink wash that we'll be applying to all of her except for her hair, and then her hair we'll use the dark flesh, which is a brown, and just add some extra water to really thin it out, and we'll use that to go ahead and apply into the creases of her her rolling hair, her curls of her hair. So definitely that's going to really start making the model pop there, looking really good. So with all of that information and paints ready to go, let's go ahead and continue on with step 2. Hello there, welcome back as we just finished up step 2 with our touch-ups, detailing, highlighting, and finally finishing off a wash with this Saloon Girl. Step 2 took me about 2.5 hours, and though it was pretty long, I'm actually kind of happy with that speed because, like I said before, there was a lot of these 3-point contacts to worry about. And I went ahead and just used the precise detailed paintbrush, but I also used a lot of toothpicks. Just took my X-Acto knife and whittled down a real fine point, and then I went in there, did a little dab, and put some dab of paint in the area, and then kind of scraped it around so that I didn't have to worry about it bleeding over to the other areas, so that it wouldn't have took like 3-4 hours to actually do this. So pretty happy with that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what our Saloon Girl looks like here after the touch-ups were done. As you can see right away, the red looks real vibrant with the Saloon Red, and I used a little bit of water to water it down, and I had to apply about another 2 or 3 coats to the front. And on the back, I did something a little bit different, and I'll talk about that when I get to the picture. Then with the gloves, arm sleeves, and the hat, I had to go ahead and make up a new batch of green because on the back of her left arm there was a splotch of red. So I went ahead and used just one part of Portal Blue, one part of Desert Yellow to make the green. And it turned out pretty good for the arm sleeves and the hat, but when I added the black to it, it changed the color just a little bit on the gloves. So not that bad. So unless you got a big splotch of paint on your miniature, don't really raise that big of a concern if something happens different, because other things down the line of your painting, in our case putting a wash on it, it's going to actually help it out a little bit. On her right side here, the colors are still vibrant and cut pretty good there. There was a little spot there on her, the dress trim of the little bow tie thing coming off that. There's a little bit of a red on it, so I just had to grab a toothpick with a little bit of black on there and kind of paint over that area, and everything's good to go there. Then on the back you can see that the red dress is very red, but the black primer that was underneath was still bleeding through, even though I was taking paint directly from the bottle. So I think there's an issue that depending upon what color you're placing on another color, the underlying color is still going to bleed through. So in the case with the black, it's still bleeding through the red for some reason. And I'm not saying that even if you put 10 coats on there that it's still going to bleed through, but after 1 or 2 coats, it finally was okay. Now another thing we're going to find is the white feather boa that she has on, and you're going to see something change a little bit when we get to the wash area when I talk about that. You got to picture, where is your miniature, your hero, or whatever it may be, going to be located at, or what is their job? And even though you might look at it and go, wow, that shouldn't be like that, you need to go ahead and paint your miniature for what it's going to be. Now the hair there is a nice vibrant yellow, but like I said before, it actually looks kind of like mustardish or a lighter brown. And we'll see what it looks after that special wash that we do to it. On her left side, colors are looking nice. Everything's good. Got rid of that red blotch on her left arm, so that green covered it up pretty good. Got ourselves a nice upward shot here. And with her collar piece, I went ahead and painted over that with the flesh, and then took a toothpick, went in there and just dabbed it onto the collar piece, and then I actually had to just take some red and slide it off to the right and left to represent the collar piece that actually went around her neck, because it didn't really look like there was something there. So remember that if you have to, just paint something on your miniature that would represent some kind of a molding that was actually going to be on there but did not show up. On her leggings, flesh, skirt, and then her red dress in the back there, that was kind of a difficult area to deal with, because when we're taking our paintbrush to go ahead and get in there to paint, the base was causing an issue, because to get the angle up into the back for that red dress there, we actually had to push the paintbrush in there and then pull it down. Instead of just sliding at an angle, we had to push and then drop. So you got to be aware of those, that something might be in the way, that there's a possibility. If you look at your miniature way prior, you could probably say, I'm going to paint the miniature before I place them onto a base. Now when we go and look down on our miniature here on the base, you can see definitely the red boots and her red boot that had that brown splotch on it, now it's all covered up with red. But as you can also see, there's a bunch of red all over the base around her boots. So, like I said, you're going to spend a couple seconds fixing up a problem, whereas you could have just left the base a couple millimeters from her boots, and then you didn't have to worry about really going back over it to deal with it. So it's definitely something you got to look at to help you increase your time of doing painting. We got that zoom in of her right glove holding the gun. I went ahead and did a little splotch of white paint on the handle there, so it looks pretty nice. And then also had to use some green to represent some of her fingers, because it didn't really look like there was any fingers there from the molding, so I just went ahead and took another toothpick and took some green and just dropped some in there to say, yep, that looks like where a finger would go. On the back side here, definitely had to do something again because it didn't look like her finger was wrapped around the trigger. So I went ahead and did a little bit of green there to show that, you know what, she's got a finger on the trigger, she's ready to shoot. Now we're going to go ahead and just take the miniature here, rotate a little bit, and what we're going to deal with now are the mold lines of your miniature. And going up the side of her hair and over her hat, you can see that there is a mold line there. And when you first get the miniature in its gray form assembled, that sometimes you really can't see these mold lines until other paint is placed on it, whether it be primer or actually colored paint. And definitely here on her left boot, you can see a good mold line coming down that needs to be cleaned up, because otherwise it's going to look kind of tacky if you're going to do this very professionally. So look out for those things. You know, get yourself a magnifying glass or something if you have to really get in there, because cleaning up mold lines on bare plastic is a lot easier than paint. Plus it looks kind of heart-wrenching that when you're ripping apart your model to get those mold lines off, you just think of all that time you put into it, and now you got to start all over again. Well, we just completed all our touch-ups and we are ready to continue on here. So we're going into our detailing, and we got 3 areas that I did with detailing. Saloon Girl, she's got to look good out there, so she needs some lipstick. So I didn't want to try and do the paintbrush thing like I did with the eyes on the Gunslinger and just splotched it all over the place. And once again, got a toothpick, shaved it really down nice and close. And then I went ahead and I didn't put the red on her lips. Instead, I took and I drug the toothpick along the line of her mouth. And then the paint kind of just bled off to fill up that area. And then I gave her 2 silver buttons on her dress. And then finished off her boots with some black bootlaces. So we just finished up our detailing, and now we're going into the highlighting. And I went ahead and just got the highlighting brush, dabbed in a little bit of white paint, brushed it off on the paper towel, but of course white on white, you can't really see it that good. So you got your hand right here, just flick it on your hand until you can barely see anything there. And then make sure that you go basically across the grain. So you don't want to go up and down with the model, because you'd be going with the flow of the folds of her clothes. You want to go across it. Now, of course, with the skirt, it's got the folds that are going horizontal, so you'll have to go up and down. But go perpendicular to the lines of what you see as the folds. And it's actually coming off kind of rough, and especially here on the back, down below on her dress, it almost looks like she was actually just drugged over the ground instead of putting a highlighting on. Because highlighting is supposed to represent the shine of a light source coming and bouncing off the fabric that they're wearing. Well, in this case, it looks kind of rough looking. But remember, once again, that when you go ahead and paint, that just because you're painting this part right now doesn't mean that that is it. You still have more stuff down the line to really worry or fix your problem. So don't just stop here and go, oh, I did it all wrong, and then just go and repaint everything red and then do another dry brushing. So we'll just continue on with that. So we finished up the highlights, and now we're going to our final, which is adding a wash. And I did a two-part wash here. One was just taking the soft tone ink and I applied it to the entire model except for her hair. And I went ahead and I just used a base coating paintbrush, and then I applied the wash just slowly. I didn't just take a bunch out and just slop it on there. I slowly added it to there, and actually one of the areas that I dealt with that I think I overdid a little bit was her face. And I applied a little bit too much wash there, and I had to go back and try and clean it off, but it was kind of drying a little bit quick. So definitely, if you don't want the wash there, you got to remove it as fast as you can. And then you're also going to notice that that Feather Boa is actually looks a little bit dirty. And what I stated earlier was that paint your miniature what they're going to be. So our Saloon Girl didn't just come out of the local clothing store all freshly dressed up. She's a working saloon girl that is out adventuring and getting dirty. So that's why her Feather Boa is looking a little bit dirty there. Now we got a little bit of a zoom in here, and as I said, I was applying some of that wash to her face, and it actually looks like the right side of her face, she looks like a burn victim that had graphing done on her face. So I think what happened was that I applied too many layers of flesh paint to her face, that it kind of, when I painted it and then it dried and then I repainted it, you're going over the paint that you prior put on there, and that's why it's getting all bumpy looking. So that was an issue there that definitely wash out on how much you're going to be placing your washes on your certain areas. Then on the back here, we got the wash that's on the bottom here with the red dress, and so I placed a lot of it in the folds because there's a very dark area there. And the Feather Boa looks a little bit washed out in the aspect of the light from above, so it looks very light, but actually it is kind of brownish looking from the wash, so it represents that, you know, she's out there adventuring and stuff like that. Now, one thing that I'm very happy with was her hair, and it really turned out very nice. I went ahead and took the dark flesh. I did one part of dark flesh, and then I took 4 parts of the water, mixed them together to form a wash, and I went ahead and applied it, and the wash, of course, went down into the crevices and into the sides of each of those bumps, which represented the curls of her hair, and it turned out very nice. So definitely don't be afraid of your washes. Just go ahead and use them nice and easy and slow. Apply them as if they are paints, so that you'll put them in the areas that you want. And then if you have another area like the hair, make up your own special wash and then apply it, and then you can go from there. And with the final step remaining, let's go ahead and see what we're going to be doing for step 3. In step 3, we're going to be doing the basing and protecting of our miniature. For the base, as I said with our Saloon Girl, she's straight across with her feet and kind of back, so we got a large open area on the front there. So we'll be putting some fine gravel, maybe some of that dead grass, some different size rocks, and even though it's a nice big area, there's a possibility I might put a big boulder there, because it wouldn't look out of place if there was a big boulder there with hardly any room. So can deal with that. And then for protecting, we'll be using that spray-on varnish from Testors, the spray lacquer from matte varnish to dullen the look of any kind of shine that our miniature might be having here. Now, the Gunslinger he looked kind of bright and shiny after I applied that spray lacquer, and it was supposed to dull down the colors, but it didn't. It seemed to give it a little bit of a shine, like he was actually wearing leathers. And there's a possibility that the spray lacquer that I'm using could be bad. So it's probably, I don't know, 15 years old. And I don't know if it's got some kind of an expiration date on it, but I'm going to go ahead and use that spray lacquer for our 4 heroes. And then I'll go ahead and get a new batch and try that out. Then I'll compare them and we'll see if actually that's what the problem was. So with that, all that information, the spray and other items are ready to go. Let's go ahead and finish our miniature with step 3. Hello there, welcome back as we just finished up step 3 with our basing and protecting of our Saloon Girl. Step 3 took me about 45 minutes to complete, and I was kind of impressed. It actually got done a little bit quicker than the Gunslinger. So as you can see here, we've got a nice big open area in front of the Saloon Girl to work with. So I went ahead and took some of that dead grass and made a dead bush out of it, and put that in the front left, and then put a couple rocks on the right side, and used a little bit bigger rocks this time. So you can see here's the placement of it. And the dead grass that I made into a bush actually went a lot quicker than it did with the Gunslinger. Went ahead and just took a chunk of it, wrapped it up a little bit, and put some super glue down, and held it in place for about 15 seconds, enough for it to stick. Then I just went ahead and just pushed it up and down, and then let it dry for a little bit, and then continued on. Went ahead and took some of that super glue gel from Gorilla and applied it onto the base. Then I went ahead and just took a toothpick and then just moved it around the base. Made sure that it didn't go over the edge onto the rim there, because if you go ahead and paint it a little bit later, you can definitely see the glue there and it would look pretty much tacky. So with all that glue on there, I went ahead and placed it into the gravel. Now for the Gunslinger, I was calling it sand, but actually it's called gravel that I'm using for the Saloon Girl here, and also the Gunslinger. From Scenorama, you can see this is the stuff that I'm using, and it is the gravel. And later on, I'm going to be using from Scenorama, I'll be using the sand, but those will be for different miniatures. So I went ahead and just took the Saloon Girl here and put her into the gravel there, and pushed the gravel over there, and they just pushed it down onto the super glue so it would adhere pretty good. And there we go, pulling it out. It's kind of messy there, so I started off by just taking my thumb and pushing it around the rim to get the gravel off the edges there. And then went ahead and just took the X-Acto knife and started flicking the gravel off of the larger rocks there and getting it out of the dead bush there. And then I'd go ahead and get the scissors and cut it down. So remember, don't just cut it straight across, so it's gonna look unnatural looking. Cut it at angles, left, right, up, down, so it looks like a natural formation of a dead bush now. And then to get it to look fuller, remember, just go and just take the X-Acto knife, place it right in there, and just twist it so that it'll make it look a little bit fuller. So that's our Saloon Girl with her base at the moment. And definitely don't have to worry about the super glue getting all the way to the edge of the base there. Just leaving a little open area right there makes it look pretty nice. So once you're happy with that the base is looking pretty good there and all of the paint is good to go, I went ahead and used the Tester's spray lacquer, which is a matte varnish, and gave it a little spray here, and it actually darkened up the colors a little bit. It still looks a little bit glossy, even after about an hour or two, it still looks a little bit glossy, but overall at the end result here, just looking at it, as opposed to the picture, it does look a little bit dulled down a bit. So, definitely looking good from this angle here. You can see all her details and her colors. Back is looking good also. You can see the highlights there off the bottom of the dress. So overall, did a very, very good job. Well, there you have it, our Saloon Girl. All the way from assembly to primed, step 1, step 2, and finally, step 3. The overall time for the Saloon Girl, including painting, changing of paints, drying, gluing, etc., was around 4 hours and 50 minutes. Well, that should do it. That is going to complete the painting of the Gunslinger and the Saloon Girl. Now that our two heroes are all in color and ready to go, let's go and get our two heroes back down to the gaming table for some more action.